The best advice I ever got was from a professor at Fairleigh Dickinson. And he said, if the way you're writing a story isn't working, you can change. Like, you have permission to change partway through. If you're used to writing chronologically and it's not working, but you have an idea for a scene that hasn't come up yet, just write that scene. Right? And you can put it back together afterward. You can reassemble it afterward. And if you're used to writing a bunch of scenes and then figuring out how they fit together later and it's not working, then you can write chronologically. And so if you're used to pantsing and it's not working, why don't you try some plotting? If you're used to plotting and it's not working, why don't you try some pantsing? And he said it doesn't have to be all or one. You don't have to be stuck in some sort of pattern that you identify with. So being given permission, sort of, that was powerful.
This is the CritRPG Podcast, your one-stop shop for everything lit RPG, progression fantasy, and Royal Road. Hi everyone, and welcome to the CritRPG Podcast, the only podcast that invites authors who sound like World War II battleships. With us today is David Niemitz.
There you go.
Author of Guild Mage. How are you doing?
Wonderful. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Now that you're here, of course.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, we've already been talking for a long time in the Patreon stuff and also before that, and it was great. So this time, this is going to be a bit different than usual because usually I make a point of not having read the book, so I can kind of talk more about the author and inspirations of that. But your book I have read because I fell in love with it. It was amazing.
Thank you so much.
For everyone who hasn't been on this trip yet, who hasn't read it, sum me on your book.
So, Guild Mage is the story of a girl who starts at basically almost the lowest point I could think of starting in a fantasy world. Liv is the bastard daughter of a single mother who's the castle cook, and she's got nothing, and she spends her mornings, scrubbing chamber pots and dirty dishes, and then about 2 chapters in, boom, she has magic, right? And she saves someone's life, and that drastically changes the trajectory of her life. I wanted to take a story in a sort of familiar seeming, in many ways, fantasy world, and I wanted to explore the whole breadth of a character's life. My previous story on Royal Road is very sort of contained within the space of a few months, and there's this crisis in this war, and everything happens very, very briefly. But in Guild Mage, I really wanted to take time to breathe and to expand and to follow someone from childhood through this long epic arc of their character. And I'm very much enjoying it. It's grown as I've gone based on reader feedback. So it's if I wanted a chance to spread out, I've gotten it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's an entire life, right? You could literally write about it for longer than someone might think, I'm going to say, without spoiling anything. But yeah, what I personally love about it so much is that we get a sense of who Liv is very, very early, and that her personality shines through the page through you're doing close third as a narrator, right?
Yeah, limited third.
Yeah. And there are changes in her personality and how she looks at things, and it's a very, very well written story, and I think it's one of the stories that I think that does a kid's perspective the best. I've read.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to start from the point of view of a kid who really doesn't have a lot of agency to begin with, and then every time she finds a chance to make a decision and to take ownership of something in her life, I feel like that's a big stride forward. By the time we're in chapter 70 something or wherever it is now, she's starting to be able to make decisions about her world much more and about what she's going to do much more. And it's a lot of fun to see her get to that point. Early on, there's a lot of adults talking over her head or past her or making decisions for her. And in one of the most recent chapters that hit Patreon, I don't know if I want to spoil too much, but one of the people who has been so significant in sort of making decisions about where her life goes, in one of the most recent chapters, she says, no, that's not what we're doing. Right. This is what we're doing instead. And to get to that point is like this huge character progression for me, I think.
I, for some reason, with the story I'm writing, like with Torchbearer, I struggle so hard with agency, because I when I was younger, I tended to write very passive characters who like life kind of happens to them and they react, which I just think like I like characters who like roll with the punches, but I can see why like people might enjoy having a bit more agency first. So like I'm still figuring it out, and I'm still like figuring out how to do this. But I've recently started plotting, and now the decisions are easier. I just have to like focus on them more. But I'm kind of been wondering. You said you outline a little bit, right?
I do bullet points. It's not as strict, I think, as some people do. I mean, I have a friend who, my friend Ben, who I believe does much more deliberate story beats. And I know that people who do romance and mystery have much more sort of strict story beats as well. But I mostly have bullet points of ideas arranged roughly chronologically, and then I add to them as I go. And a lot of times, my wife laughs at me, right? Like I'll get out of the shower, and there's something about like that hot water on your head.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but I always come out of the shower with ideas, and then I have to like grab my phone, and open a Google Doc and add bullet points before I lose it, So, but I mean, I have bullet points going out through something like 5 or 6 arcs for Guild Mage.
Okay.
And
well, that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, that idea of sort of trying to go through an entire life of a character. So there's things that are much farther down the line.
Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know what my problem is with the whole like plotting and outlining and everything. But I think I'm still like in one of those phases where I'm still putting in my 1 million words.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah.
And I mean, I feel like, do you know the plotter versus pantser?
Yeah, klar.
Have you heard that? Right. I mean, I feel like I'm definitely on the pantser side of the equation.
Yeah.
Maybe not all the way, but things change.
I used to be too, but so I had Travis Baldry on the podcast, and he said, I want to be a pantser. I tried. I wrote 5 books as a pantser. They were all bad. So, and I hate doing things twice. So now I just go and I plot, and that's it. Yeah, but Travis is like someone. It's easy to say like he has extraordinary talent, but I think he has just extraordinary willpower. He does things and fails, and he's okay with it, and then just keeps doing it until he's great at it.
We have this joke. We teach my son this, right? My wife and I. Whenever someone says, "Oh my God, you must be so talented," what is it really? Well, it's hard work and practice.
Yeah.
Right.
Talent is nothing but interest, right? If you're like 3 years old and you really like the sound that the piano makes, and you do nothing but like sit on the piano for like 8 hours a day because that's like what gives you happiness and joy, then of course by the time you're 15 you're Mozart.
My little brother's like that in one way. I mean, not Mozart level, though he's wonderful. But I mean, he started drumming. I'm trying to remember how old he was when he started drumming. I mean, like less than 10, right? And really got into drumming and got into drumming competitions and had all this. I mean, he ended up going to East Con College and getting a degree in jazz drumming, right? And so he's an incredible drummer and musician, right? But that's when you do something for 20 years. Right. And you put in the time and you put in the effort, then that's what you get. Right. And he's amazing. I could,
So I wish I had written more after I finished my very, very bad draft of The Flower, the Wish, and the Blood. Because I read that and I was like, oh, this is horrible. Like the characters are like cardboard. The plot doesn't go anywhere. Like this is taking forever. I don't want to do this anymore. And then I stopped writing for like 7 years. And I wish I had kept going. I wish I had known back then that like it doesn't matter if like what other people might think about this, and that I can see like, hey, look, this is not up to my standards yet, but that it's okay that my standards for perfection shouldn't be the standards for learning. So
right, and every if you look at it as everything you write, is a chance to do better than what came before, and you've learned from these things that came before, and the first thing you wrote should be the worst, right? Because you're going to get better, but it is a struggle. I mean, that sort of ability to regulate your own emotions. It's tough sometimes. You get a comment that's harsh or something, or someone writes a review that's not so good, and you're like, oh my god, do I suck? Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, like it's very hard. Like I recommend pottery. I had for some reason I was friends with a bunch of poets in college. We all studied with this wonderful woman called Diane Seuss, who turned out to be a Pulitzer Prize winner. Not that I learned anything from her because I still suck at poetry, but like she had like this like really close, tight knit group of people around her. I wasn't one of them, but I am still friends with many of them, and they all started doing pottery at the same time. And one of them is doing it now. And someone commented on this thread, going like, I really wish I had like stuck with pottery, but my first things, they were all so bad."
Well, yeah.
And I said like, but look, pottery is like the perfect thing, because no one comes to you and goes like, "Oh, pottery! Like, when are you going to sell your first furniture, like your first vase?" Like, no one does that. Like when you're an author, everyone says that. Oh, when you sell your first book. But if you like playing soccer out on or football or like whatever, out on the pitch, like your friends aren't coming by like, "Hey, why aren't you in the Champions League yet?" Like no one does that.
Yeah, you're just playing for fun, and
just with like, for some reason people believe that I don't know, like you can go on Royal Road and expect people to be like George R. R. Martin, like with perfectly edited books the entire time. Yeah, I don't know. How do you do it with the self-regulation, with the emotions?
It's tough. I try to, sometimes I want to respond to things, and I sort of set myself a rule that I'm not going to respond to negative things for the most part. There's a function to hide bad reviews. You can just be like, it's still there, but I don't see it.
Yeah.
So I'll see it and I'll look at it the first time and I'll think about it a little bit, and then I'll get rid of it, because if I see it every time I open the page up, then it's going to kill me, right? And I'll try to focus on something else. Seeing people, whether it's on Patreon or Royal Road, or I have two friends actually that are that have gotten really into reading Guild Mage, and they have like a private chat where they like throw theories at each other, and they'll sometimes like after the chapters come out, they'll ask me things. But anything like that's like an expression of enthusiasm is something I can latch onto, almost to like comfort yourself. Yeah.
I'm going to like put on my Marcus Aurelius hat and say like, none of that should matter.
It shouldn't. Right? It shouldn't.
Right? Yeah, I've gotten really good at it for some reason. I always have like the dude in my head from Big Lebowski.
Yeah.
Where
the dude abides.
Yeah, where he just it's like, well, like this novel needs to do this and this, or like it's really bad, and I was like, well, that's just kind of your opinion, man.
Yeah, and sometimes it's so funny because I'm like, well, that just hasn't happened yet, like it's coming, it's coming.
Yeah, and one thing I like to do is agree and redirect, right? Because I'm like, it really helps me like, in a really weird way. It gives me like some sort of like sense of control and power to kind of, if someone is like very aggressive or something, I can say like, I'm really looking at like, hey, why is this guy hurting? Right? This old like joke, like, who hurt you?
Yeah.
And then you're like, hey, I can really see you're really upset. And I'm so glad that you enjoy the story so much that you're upset about it. Now, with your comment, that's not really helping me all that much, because you're expressing that upset in a way that is like quite honestly hurtful. So if you want me to do something about your hurt, you can express your opinion in a different way. Thank you very much for reading. And it helps.
I don't think I've had anything that like angry yet.
Yeah,
I'm sure it'll come eventually with, but
yeah,
not
that
yet.
doesn't work. Doesn't work for people like who are just like apathetic, who are like, well, I have put on my beret and I'm now a French literary expert, and this is of course the worst drivel I have ever read. Right?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't work. Like because
The weirdest stuff is I've got one or two people that have made comments that are just sort of strangely misogynistic about, because it's a female main character.
Yeah.
And so there's just been some weirdly misogynistic comments, and there was one that I had to like block and ban. I was like, I can't deal with that.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, again, I guess I should have expected it, but there it is.
Well, no, you can expect people to be better. That's okay.
Yeah.
Like I think if someone like comments something and they have no fictions and is critical, I have no qualms about blocking them. I've only
blocked one. I've only blocked one so far.
It's your kingdom. You can block whoever you want.
Yep.
Right? Because like I don't think that these people have any right to my time. If they don't like it, that's perfectly fine. And they can downrate me, and I mean that yeah, sure. Less people will see my book, but the people who like it are still going to be there, are still going to read it. I have 350 people who read my book every week.
Yep.
I'm cool with that. That's
which is awesome.
A lot of people.
Yep.
So it also helps that like I'm not doing this for a living. So.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, Royal Road has been incredible for getting an audience.
Of any shape.
Of any shape, right? And it's been wonderful in that way. But before I found Royal Road, I really had no conception of what I was going to do to find an audience except to toss a book on Amazon, right, and see what happened. And then, it sort of just falls into the ether and floats away. But first of all, I think I capped out somewhere around 400 with my first Royal Road story, which was Faerie Knight. And that at the time that was great, right? I had 350, 400 people reading a book, and I'd never had that before, right? And then Guild Mage blew up, and it's when I looked at it today, it was 3,600, right? And that's sort of mind boggling and astounding.
You didn't even do any like advanced strats, right?
I mean, not particularly. I lined up shoutouts from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I had an ad from the get-go. I launched it as part of Write-a-thon. And then I told people who were, I had the 300, 400 people on Faerie Knight. I said, hey, check out my new thing. But that was it. That was it.
There's like lots of optimization you can do for a book launch.
I didn't do any of that. I didn't do any of it.
Yeah, exactly. Because like I have people who like literally like plan this out like to the last minute. Like when do they shout out whom to like get the perfect curve and so on and so forth. Like there's lots of stuff you can do.
Yep.
But a book that organically just does well is just a good book. Unfortunately, you have written one of those. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that there's ways that I could be more efficient with shoutouts, but I just do first come, first serve, and I take anyone. Which maybe I shouldn't, but I do.
I mean, to be honest, I will no longer shout out books that I read, and I'm like, hey, I don't like that. Right? I am very selective. Also, like, I have 883 followers. Who's gonna care? Like, it's fine. But what I do want is that whenever I do a shout out, people read it. People are like, oh yeah, this is actually good. Like this is actually good, right? Like Pirate Arbor, for example, does the same thing. Like they shout out a book every once in like half a year, and then that book like explodes.
Well, it matters because they've used the platform. I've looked at it this way, and I think there's multiple ways to look at it, that are sort of legitimate. That any chance I can give someone to have their work in front of eyes, like that, it's so easy to put something out there that you've put a lot of effort into and have no one notice it, right? And that there are people who, for whatever reason, can't afford to do ads or what have you. And so, if I can put some eyes in front of someone's blurb, then it just feels like it's a good thing to do. I don't know.
Like it is a there's no right answer here.
Yeah.
Would you rather have one person that you think deserve, like that in your personal opinion deserves it, get more views, or a bunch of people who don't know just get views because or like fewer views, because if you do like one of those every single chapter, people are way less likely to click it.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever I do my shoutouts, I can kind of check out where I get them from, where I get the most from, and in my little like writer group, there's Miles English, who writes Box and Isekai, and he does something we call the Bog Bump. Because like whenever he shouts out a book, you know this, like you get like 150 followers immediately.
Yep.
Because like, yeah, he's very selective.
I've had a couple of people, who reached out to me in DMs afterward and said, like your shout out got me so many views or something like that. And that
Nice.
feels good. I'm happy for them. And at the same time, I'm writing so much at the moment that I don't have time to sort of figure out, to go in and read everyone who asks me for a shout out. I couldn't do it. If I was doing that, I couldn't be writing.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm also releasing one chapter a week, so I'm chilling. Right. So you're still releasing like one a day, right?
I'm doing Monday to Friday on Royal Road, and then Saturday and Sunday on Patreon.
Okay. I mean, just on Patreon, or
so it's a way to build up the backlog,
okay.
right? So I right now I'm at 6 chapters ahead on Patreon because I've been doing that for 3 weeks, and this weekend I should get to 8 chapters ahead.
Nice.
After this, I still have to write. I haven't written yet today.
Yeah, I've written before we did the podcast, because I am actually very much an early bird. Let me just check your Patreon. Yeah,
I'm an early bird too. Yeah. Unfortunately, it was the child and the dog are awake, and the dog needs to be walked, and the child needs breakfast, and then oh my god, it's 8:00. Time to get on here.
Yeah, and then like just make sure that you don't like mistake everything, and then you feed the dog and walk the kid, and like
they'll let me know.
Yeah, it's like, Dad, what are you doing with the leash? Yeah, it's like, it's for your own good, son. No, like, I don't know.
Out the door.
Yeah, go on. No. No, I don't have kids, so I wouldn't know. I also don't have a dog, so I wouldn't know either. Okay, but
we have a pug.
Oh, nice. We've already talked about like why and how your book. It's kind of been hiding in what we already talked about, and so on and so forth. But can you tell me a little bit more about kind of what inspired Guild Mage? Just for like 5 minutes.
Sure. There's a couple of inspirations. One of them is that I felt like so much of the time when fantasy worlds explore a race of characters that is longer lived, that they are often not the viewpoint characters, or if they are, that it doesn't really grapple with the effects of being a longer lived race. Have you ever seen those jokes, those memes about how like in Star Trek, Kirk is almost like Spock's dog? because the percentage of Spock's life that Kirk is his best friend is more equivalent to the percentage of your life that you have a dog. Right. And I feel like so rarely, though someone did point me at an anime recently that deals with it, and I haven't watched it yet, but I should. But
Free Run?
Yeah.
Free Run is very good.
Yeah, and I haven't seen it, but someone did actually point me at it recently, and I should get around to watching it at some point when I have time. But I wanted to explore the difficulties that would arise from being a character who grows and develops more slowly and lives a longer life in a society where everyone else is growing up and aging and dying. Right. And so that was a big thing. And then I drew inspirations from other places too. There's, I've been playing a bunch of Diablo 4, and I liked the idea in Diablo 4 that every time anyone had anything to do with summoning a demon for any reason, even if it was for a good reason, it always went horribly. Right. That, like, even if you had the best intentions, it went horribly wrong. And so when I sort of thought about these dead gods, these old gods within the world, I wanted to eventually work up to that kind of feel where, and I know you haven't quite got this far, right? But
Yep.
there's but you did see the little statue get stolen, right?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so that's the statue of a
Don't spoil me.
Okay. I won't spoil you. Fair enough. But
Or the listeners, yeah.
or the listeners if they haven't read it. But sort of that there's this idea that there are people that are getting into this sort of cult for reasons that are in some ways sympathetic reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But that regardless of what the motivations are, it goes horribly, right? And that trying to get something good out of a cosmic force that is evil is not in the end going to get you what you wanted. That it's going to go badly for you. And so that bit I sort of pulled a bit from Diablo.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, these things tend to happen when you summon demons, yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. There's so many places that, you draw from a billion places when you put things together. We went on a family vacation to Colorado this past summer. We went, my wife's uncle and aunt had gotten a home up in Steamboat Springs in Colorado, and we had never been to Colorado. We took my son, and it was like stepping into a different world. In New England and Connecticut, we're in this sort of like extended swamp around the Connecticut River, and it's often very humid and very muggy. And then you step out from the airport into Colorado and you're in the mountains, and just the air is different.
Yeah.
And the sky seems bigger. And it's standing up in the mountains and looking down in the valley it's like incredible, right? And there's nothing like that around here. We're a very sort of low, Connecticut's a very sort of low part of the United States. And this was all when I was wrapping up writing the last book of Faerie Knight and starting to make notes on Guild Mage. And I had originally thought that I was going to set it in a city by the sea. Right. And then after we went to Colorado, I was like, no, I'm doing it in the mountains. Right. I want to channel like Colorado into the initial setting of this book. So that's, that's where that came from.
When I flew to Italy for the first time, when I got into RPG, actually, I flew over this like set of valleys in the Alps, and several of them had like really cool lakes with like mansions next to them. I was like, man, I want one of those.
Right.
I want one of those so bad. Yeah. I like the mountains. I'm more of a mountain person myself. Like, to quote Anakin Skywalker, sand just gets everywhere. So I'm not very much of a beach person.
I mean, I think I almost have to be a beach person. I live in New England. We go down to Cape Cod and all that. So I do love beaches, but
You're a son of a beach?
You and the puns.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I am though. It's one of my happy places. There's
yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. I get it. And I do like lying at the beach, laying at the beach. I mean, I also say like, no, I don't have any money, so I'm lying sometimes. But it's the last time I went to a beach was in the Caribbean.
Okay.
And that was something. So very, very cool. Very clean water.
It's very different from like a New England beach. We have this very dark ocean.
So we were talking about like Lovecraft, and the other connection I always make is like Life is Strange, and which is, by the way, a really good game about living in like a New England coast town. And I don't know. There's something very very Americana about it in some ways, and it's a setting that completely fascinates me. I have a story that I want to write like that, but that's ways off. But yeah, cool. All right, second question. Now that we are like halfway into the podcast, I'm so good at timing. What's the best advice you've ever gotten as a writer?
The best advice I ever got was from a professor at Fairleigh Dickinson. And he said, actually going back to the Pantser versus plotter and all that sort of thing, he said, look, if the way you're writing a story isn't working, you can change. Like, you have permission to change partway through. And he said, if you're used to writing chronologically and it's not working, but you have an idea for a scene that hasn't come up yet, just write that scene. right? And you can put it back together afterward. You can reassemble it afterward. And if you're used to writing a bunch of scenes and then figuring out how they fit together later and it's not working, then you can write chronologically. And so if you're used to pantsing and it's not working, why don't you try some plotting? If you're used to plotting and it's not working, why don't you try some pantsing? And he said it doesn't have to be all or one. You don't have to be stuck in some sort of pattern that you identify with. And so being given permission, sort of, that was powerful, I thought.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a very good point.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit tangential,
mm-hmm.
but I've kind of been thinking about, like allowing myself to write differently. And you were saying like plotting and pantsing, and yes, I have started to plot, and yes, I do like it. And yes, I still have issues with. I don't have issues, but in this particular one book, I have an issue with the character. In every other book, I can just like slip into their mind like it's super easy. But with this one book, I can't, and I don't know why.
Some characters are easier than others, and some characters almost... I found some characters expand when I didn't expect them to. Liv in Guild Mage is really easy to write, and really easy to write a lot of.
Yeah, because you can read that. Yeah, you can read it in the scene. Yeah.
In Faerie Knight, there were characters that were side character viewpoints that ended up growing, and having a lot more going on than I thought that they would. That hasn't happened in Guild Mage yet. We'll see if it does, but I haven't had the feeling yet that anyone but her is like demanding time or space in the same way.
Yeah, I can see that. For like the same thing, like I always compare like Band and Torchbearer, because Band is like way easy to write. Like they have like a werewolf with ADHD that's easy to write.
Yeah.
And it really is like slip into them and like also stay in character and kind of like write like that. Even the prose is different. It's mad fun. But for Sam, it's so hard because she can be so many things. And I think I overdid it with like the realism of the character. I think one thing that is very good to learn is that characters in a book shouldn't be realistic. They should. It is okay to have a character who is one thing until they change. Like that is okay. People expect that. Like I was reading a book about characters yesterday, and so he said like, yeah, like characters, people don't want to be surprised. They want to say, "I knew it."
Yes.
So
they want to be satisfied.
Exactly. So one of his suggestions was to hammer in the characterization very early in the first 10 pages, like hammered over and over and over again. And then the rest of it just kind of like works itself out. Yeah, that kind of works.
There's also this element of like fulfilling the promises that you make. We mentioned, I don't know if it was on this or the Patreon part earlier, but we mentioned this idea of that I think you said that when you log onto Royal Road, you're not going to find someone who's professionally edited and writing like a George R. R. Martin, right? Yeah. And when you look at the way that the last couple of seasons of Game of Thrones were, the reaction, right, that people had, I think there's an element of, if you can undermine expectations early to some extent and have surprises early. But when it comes time to land the ending, if you're not paying off the things you've set up, people get angry. Yep. And I don't know what it was like in Germany, but in the United States, at least, Game of Thrones was huge. It was huge. It was everywhere. There was merchandise. People were talking about it. It was on TV. President Obama was watching it. Everyone was watching it, right? And then all of a sudden the finale dropped and it was like it all went away. Just and no one wanted to talk about it, and it was nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. In Germany, I don't know, like we don't have these huge cultural phenomenon anymore. Like it's something you discuss with a circle of friends, but and like all the colleagues or so on and so forth. But in some ways, like Germans are very much focused on like whatever they're doing. So like if you're at work, you're talking about work. If you're with friends, you talk about friend stuff, and you very rarely interact with strangers. Germany is a very, very tough like country to get to know people, like really get to know people. That's was a joke that Americans are peaches and Germans are coconuts. So with
America changes a lot by region, though.
Oh, that's very, very true. Yeah, but in general,
New England is famously unfriendly.
True, very true. But I mean, I studied in the Midwest. It was very easy to kind of like get to know people and to hang out and just like have a good time. But very few of these friendships were very deep.
That makes sense.
Right? Yeah. And like because like it's a peach, you get in very easy, but then there's like a tough like core in the middle. Okay. Germans are coconuts. You talk to them at the bar, you're like, "Hi, how you doing?" Like, "Good, thank you," and then it's sort of away and do something else. Like, if you don't have it into that friend group, you will not get in that friend group.
Interesting. Okay.
But once you do, it's like, do you need to move? I will help you. Here's a fridge company move. Here's a new fridge for you. I brought ice to cool all your stuff. I will move it to the Sperrmüll tomorrow for you, and I will bring the car. No worries. Like that happens. Like, yeah, I could literally like any of my German friends. I could be like, hey, so I got a body to bury. Yeah. We need time, and they're like, I am already here. Thank you.
Have you ever heard? There's a saying about East Coast versus West Coast in America.
No, go ahead. I mean, like there is, but yeah, go ahead.
Okay, and it's the difference between nice and kind. And
I know which is which.
so I didn't come up with this, right? But so I've heard people say this, that on the West Coast, people will be very nice to you, right? They'll be very pleasant. They'll be very et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas in the East Coast of New England, right, and New York City and places like that, if your car breaks down, someone will stop and they'll be complaining the entire time, but they'll help you get your car going. They won't be nice about it, right? Yeah. But they'll help you.
It's very Berlin. It's very Berlin. Like I love Berlin for this. It's like you're like, sorry, is this bus going to this in the station? Yeah. What did it say on the thing? It says like this decision. Like, is this on the route? I'm like, I don't know, probably. He's like, yeah, so get in. I'm like, I'm getting in. Like, hey, wait, you have a ticket? I'm like, would I get in if I didn't have one? He's like, good point, but show me. And I showed him. It's like, good, do that next time. Like, thank you. He said, fuck you. I was like, also fuck you. And then everything was fine.
There you go.
It was great. Yeah, Germany, Berlin especially, is very, very notorious for people being very unfriendly. Like, you're in a restaurant and like they go to you and you're like, what do you want? And you're like, oh, well, I have a beer and this and this. And like, cool. And just walks away and brings it the beer. And then you're like, thank you so much. This was very, very friendly of you. And they struggle to keep their like angry face. It's great. It's fun.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I'd love to go someday. We'll see.
Yeah, you should. Berlin is great, especially in the summer. It's a city where there has very few rules. Berlin is the Hotel California of Europe. You can come, but you can never leave. People just get stranded here. Like, they just arrive, and then you can't think about living anywhere else, even though the city fucking sucks. Pardon my French.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's a vibe.
Can a team of has-been teen idols save the world? Find out in the new series Boy Bands and Dragons. When Neverboyland is sucked into a magical world, their reunion takes a back seat to staying alive. But if they can get over the past drama that drove them apart, they may find that even pop stars can be heroes. Come and discover your new favorite read. Our comeback tour is Slaying Monsters, the first in the Boy Bands and Dragons series by Kim Smuga Otto, dropping on Kindle Unlimited, October 25th.
Okay, question number 3.
Question 3.
Is it one thing that you would go back to and change, or something that you've learned while writing, where you're like, oh wow, this is I will do this differently from now on?
That one requires a little bit of thought. I mean, so I feel like every project I've done, I've learned. And one of the things that's obvious is that I've had to learn about building an audience. And, when I wrote the first book, I had no plan for it. It was a science fiction novel, and I dropped it on Amazon, and I had no idea what to do with it. Right. And I learned a lot from writing it, but I also learned, I have to do something to get it out there, because otherwise no one knows and no one cares. Right. And you're just shouting into the wilderness. So there's that. Right. And then I found Royal Road, and I went onto Royal Road, and I started writing on Royal Road, and I've learned a lot more as I went. It's interesting because some of the things that I thought worked well with Faerie Knight, I didn't do for Guild Mage. Like I had the entire first book done, for Faerie Knight. And then I did, I had read on Reddit, like, okay, well, you should drop like 10 chapters on the first day, and then you should do a chapter a day, because you have to have 20,000 words or Rising Stars won't notice you. And so I did all that stuff the first time, and it didn't really, it did all right, but it didn't ever get on, main Rising Stars or anything like that. And then for Guild Mage, I was like, well, I'm not gonna do that. Right. I'm going to try this write-a-thon thing, and I'm not going to let myself start writing ahead of time.
Which is, by the way, like the most terrible time to like launch a book if you're looking for like standout, but go ahead. Yeah.
I thought, I'll try something different,
Yeah.
So I'll try write-a-thon, and I'll.
So I've tried having this like a lot of success, and I did a lot of planning to like make sure I was great. And so for the next book, I thought, how about I just don't?
Yeah, that's basically what happened. But what was interesting about it was that I think having a date, I think it was October 31st, right, where you could start, and saying I can't start writing until the 31st means that all I can do is make notes on characters and settings and plot points.
Yeah.
And so that when it was time to start writing, I had a very good idea of what I was going to do, and I felt like I was sort of carried along by the momentum of it in a lot of ways while I was writing a chapter a day. And it's been interesting to dial up, at the height of Faerie Knight, I was writing a 2,000 word chapter a day, but only on weekdays. Right. And now I'm writing 3,000 word chapters a day, every day. And in some ways I thought it would be more difficult than it was to go up. It wasn't as hard as I thought it would be, like strangely. Right.
I mean, I've had a friend of mine just talked about this today. He was like, I'm so beat up because I haven't been writing as much as I wanted to. And, I hit my time goals. I didn't hit my word goals. This is terrible. And I said, like, John Scalzi writes 400 words a day. Neil Gaiman finished what's it called? Start with a C and ends with an I-N-E. It's not Clementine. It's
Coraline.
Not Coraline. Yeah. I was going to say Caroline, but no, it's Coraline. He wrote that 50 words a day. There is no right amount of words. Nope. Yes, it is less risky to write 5 books that sell for 20K rather than 2 books that sell for 50K, right? Yep. Or should sell for 50K. But at the same time, if you enjoy what you're doing and can afford to keep doing it, then there is no right way of doing it.
What's the right amount of words? Like any words, right?
Yeah. What's the length of what's the length of string, right? Length of a piece of string. It's.
And you talk about the million words earlier. You write that's the Stephen King, right? The first million suck, and then from there you can, you know what you're doing, right? But you figure out what works for you as you go.
Yeah, exactly. And embracing the suck is great, right? Because in German there's a saying, and that is I'm going to say it first in German then in English.
Okay.
Ist der Ruf erst ruiniert, lebt sich's gänzlich ungeniert. And it's very old-timey German. And what it means is, like, once reputation is ruined, you can do whatever the fuck you want.
There you
part
go.
of French
I like
again.
that. I like that. I like
Right?
that.
And so,
Do you know that there's an American fascination with German words?
yes, I have been to America. Yes.
Yeah. You know, there's these, like these memes that'll go around on the internet, of like a word for this concept exists in other languages and we don't have it,
Yeah. Like, for example, the death of the forest. Waldsterben. Right. Or a place where you put children outside so they can play. Like a kindergarten.
Yep. And then, of course, we took it and turned it into a word for a school, but,
Yeah. I mean, like, you can do that. That's fine.
Yeah.
Like, it is a formative place. But my favorite ones are the ones where it's like these like old World War II pictures. And then it says like, this is a Flammenwerfer. It werfs Flammen. So like it's like a flamethrower.
okay. Yep.
Or like this is a Panzerfaust. It fausts panzers. It is gloriously dumb, and it makes way more sense as a picture. But the funny part is that is literally how these German words work. You start with a thing, basically like the object of the compound noun. And then you construct it like backward, because I have read your book and I know that you like your linguistics, and I also know that you have written a language that has both female and male nouns.
Yep.
So yep.
So we can talk about that a little if you want.
I mean, like we could talk about it in the bonus material, because I'm quite sure that will get people to subscribe. Like,
sure.
let's go. Let's have the English teacher and the English college like teacher talk about like
linguistics
for like half an hour. That's gonna be awesome. Yeah. But yeah, like you start with a thing that it describes, and then you add all the basically adjectives in front of it, or like add nouns, I should rather say. I don't know the right word for it. It's fun. It's cool.
Language is fascinating. I sometimes wish I could do more with it, but
the English language is basically like 6 languages in a trench coat.
It's crazy. Yeah.
English is the world's most famous pidgin language.
Yeah. I have it? I don't know if I'm going to go over and grab it, but I mean, I've still got my college textbooks on Old English and stuff over there. I say.
Should we do the Canterbury rap?
Oh, I mean, I did even earlier, because Canterbury's is middle, is middle, and then but I've got like I took completely voluntarily, right? Like this was not something that was required for my undergrad degree, but I took an Old English course that was, like a 400 or 500 level course as an undergrad that I wasn't really supposed to be in. That was where we would do translations. We would have the Cadmus and hymns or poetry in Old English, and they would be like, okay, well, go take your charts in your book and prepare a translation.
I'm going to raise you.
Raise you. Oh, yeah. Go for it.
We had a choice between Old English and Middle English. And in Old English we did mostly like trying to do some translations, but mostly was grammar. Very dry. And so I picked Middle English, and I failed the first time.
Oh no!
And then the next time I got an A, because I got so deep into the stuff, and I had a very good teacher too. She was awesome.
It makes a lot of difference. The teacher makes so much difference.
Yeah, totally. And but what we did in Middle English was we did phonetics, and we did we learned about stuff like the Southumbrian vowel dampening.
Cool.
In German, it's a wonderful description. It is it's 2 words, by the way. Die Südhumbrische Verdumpfung.
Oh,
it's a wonderful word.
Yeah, it's great.
A very woody word. But yeah, phonetics in English were great, because there's so many connections to German. Like night, for example, was pronounced not night. That's very, very francophone. But nicht.
Nicht. Yep. And now in modern English, when you see night, the time of day, versus night, the guy with a sword, right? They're pronounced the same way, but of course, at the time they would have been pronounced, nicht versus knicht. And
it's a difference of night and day.
I mean, I love getting into that stuff. It's so fascinating.
Yeah,
Etymology is
absolutely.
so much fun to me, and English is a fascinating language because it's gone through these successive invasions that that have shaped the language. The French introduction into the language, and
My favorite one is the Scandinavian.
Mhm.
All words with like IE in them,
Mhm.
or that have let's start on like SH sounds are
Mhm.
most likely Scandinavian.
Mhm.
And my favorite example of that is the word like starve and die.
Mhm.
Now, in German or in Germanic languages, starvan means like that's old Proto-German. No,
Yeah.
it's old German. Means to die, and so the English had that word too. But then the Scandinavians came over, and suddenly there were other reasons to die than just of hunger.
Yep.
Right. And that was like by the sword. That is why it's die by the sword, by the way. Because they suddenly had to like have a new word, and that was dying. Don't ask me where death is from. I'm not quite sure of the etymology of that, but yeah, it's fascinating shit.
Yeah, it's great. I love it. And you can probably see some of my fascination with that in Guild Mage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's great. I also I really like the teacher character. Even though knowing you while reading was like, that is such wish fulfillment. No, it's a really good teacher character, and I like your characters in the way that none of them are perfect, but none of them are assholes.
Yeah, I try to have characters that have their own wants and desires, even if they're minor characters, and responses that are human. I mean, I don't know if you've got yet to the two girls that are kind of school bullies.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like I had readers who were like, I hope she kills them. And I was like, this is literally like kids in a classroom being mean to each other. I don't think we've escalated to the point of murder yet, right? I mean, like, mind the scale. Mind the scale.
That reminds me of Shirt when he was on the podcast and he was like talking about his early comments about like Farah. Like, oh, obviously this is like a love interest, and then she wasn't a love interest, and like it like completely sort of like bitch is gonna die, right?
Yep.
So like road readers are something special, man.
Sometimes they're bloodthirsty. Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. It's like it doesn't matter if you're like a 7-year-old kid. Like something has to die.
Yeah.
Okay, but what's one book that you love and why is it awesome?
Oh well, there's so many.
I said one.
Just one. Okay.
Make it harder.
I'll do one that I read within the past year or two. I think it was. I read maybe a couple of years ago now. I don't know. Sorry, you get to be 40 something and you start to lose track of how many years it's been.
Oh yeah.
Time passes differently. There was this novel called Arkwright by Alan Steele. And I thought it was fascinating because it went through multiple generations of characters working on this same project of essentially sending out a colony ship from Earth. And it was fairly hard science fiction. And, the characters that started the process were, all long dead, by the time the process was finished. And I thought moving through multiple generations was fascinating. I also liked that about Seveneves, which I read a little bit ago. Did you read that?
No.
That was Neil Stevenson.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's interesting because I felt like, Seveneves, what was it, 2015? Yeah, so it's almost 10 years ago now. And I felt like there was an Elon Musk character in it. Like that there was both a clearly Neil deGrasse Tyson and a clearly Elon Musk, reskinned.
Oh wow, yeah. Okay, that's a bestseller. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then on Royal Road, I don't know. Should I shout out something that I just found on Royal Road?
That's
really
question
cool?
number 5.
That's okay. Should I wait? Should I wait?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so things that I've read, like recently that I just thought were so cool. I'm not finished yet, but I've just been reading The Unexpected Engagement of the Marvellous Mr. Penn. and it's this like quasi-Victorian mystery mixed with a little bit of romance in like a not
cool.
London, and it's got some sort of Sherlock Holmesy vibes, and it's finished, and it's very good at doing, you know how mystery has like this very sort of specific formula and almost has to, right, in order for the things to work out. It's very good at it, and I did not expect to find a mystery with like a period mystery with hints of romance on Royal Road, right? It's very outside of the box. You know, the box is so much lit RPG and progression and Zanzia and things like that. So I was sort of delighted to find it, and that's a lot of fun. Other things that like I read every time I see something come out, right? And I guess some of these are going to be more popular. We talked about Evil Antagonist. I read every time a chapter drops for that. Ave Xia Rem. Every time something drops for that, I read it.
Which one?
Ave. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Ave Xia Rem.
Ave Xia Rem.
It's
yeah.
A very, oh my god, what does it stand for? It's a very cliche Zanzia harem story, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's which is like
awesome.
I feel like it's like one of the best like Zanzia stories on the site at the moment. So that's been a lot of fun.
Okay, I think that that's like the side of Royal that is never explored by anyone. I can, I mean, I don't know if I can recommend, but I've heard a lot of good things about. I kid you not, the books are literally called "Sexy Space Babes" and "Sexy Steampunk Babes." So that's my shout out.
I've seen those advertised. I haven't read them, but I've seen them advertised.
Yeah. Well, Dave, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
Before we go on to the Patreon content where we talk more about linguistics, any last words?
Thank you for having me so much, and thank you for thank you to everyone who's helped make Guild Mage a success on Royal Road. And if you haven't checked it out, we'd love to have you come read it and join us in the comments and talk about things.
Yeah, and you totally should. Like, it's a really, really good story. Also, you should check out Dave's Patreon. He is building his Patreon stash.
Yep.
You can read up to 8 chapters.
Well, I don't know exactly when this will release. But as of when we're recording it, so as of when we're recording it, it's 6 chapters ahead. It'll probably be 8 chapters ahead by the time this is released. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, with that being said, thank you everyone for listening and or watching. Oh, you can also check out my Patreon, of course. Thank you. And I will see you next time.